All right, you guys, if you're ready for a massive Ender 3 review and assembly guide, grab some popcorn, get your favorite beverage, and let's get right into it. All right, all you 3D printing junkies, my name is Spencer. This is the Final Layer 3D Printing YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be doing an Ender 3 review as well as an assembly guide with pro tips. This is actually my 10th Ender 3 that I'm going to be assembling today. The Ender 3 is by far one of the most popular and most affordable 3D printers of the past few years. But why? What actually makes it so great? Why do people love this printer? Well, stick around because I'm going to let you know what I think about it, and I'm also going to let you know whether I think it's still a good use of your money in mid-2020. I've been running Ender 3s in my print farm for the last 2 years, which makes roughly 100,000 hours of print time put on these machines. Let's start by opening up this box. How'd that get in there? Let's unbox the Ender 3. This is my handy dandy obsidian blade, and this is what I'm going to be doing my review unboxings with. Alright, so I have everything laid out here. There's a few things I'm going to be using that don't come with the kit that you're going to need if you want to do some of the pro tips I'm going to give you. So the first one is a square. It doesn't need to be very big. It can be even smaller than this as long as it's a square. Some scissors. If you really wanted, you could try to use the clippers for it. And then just either some paper. I have these sticky notes that I'm going to use. And then I also have this little organizer. It's going to keep, your bolts and screws more organized for you, and it's going to be better for you overall. I also have these springs, which I'm going to be using later on. First thing we're going to want to do is get out the instructions. And there's a few other documents in here. If you don't plan on doing any upgrades or mods, I would keep this information. It's like warranty and things like that, so I would keep that if you don't plan on modifying it at all. But really all we need is the instruction booklet right here. So let's open this up. And before we start with any of these steps, actually, the first thing you're going to want to do is grab the power supply and grab something small that you're going to want to change the voltage on there. By default, they come 230 volts. If you're in the US, you're going to need to change that. If you're in many other countries, you can leave it, but if you're in the US, you need to switch this right now so you don't forget. It's very important. Okay, let's put that back here. And this instruction booklet is actually pretty good, pretty detailed. So what I'm going to do is go hyperspeed through doing this, and then when I come to a spot that I think is important, or if I'm giving you a special tip or pro tip, then I'm going to slow down the video and let you know. So let's get right into this. In this first step, it's very specific on where these holes are aligned, and they have the picture from the front. So if you're looking at the front, you need to make sure you're looking at where these holes are on these two aluminum extrusions. All right, so when you're tightening these up right here, when you're first putting them on, get one to where it's slightly snug up against this, and then tighten the other one. Don't get one of them super tight and then do the other one, because it's not going to let it sit correctly. And the next thing I want to show you guys is we need to make sure this is square, that this right here is square. Because if it's not, what's going to happen is your prints are going to print, well, if you're looking at it from this way, if this isn't square and it's leaning slightly towards this end, your prints are going to slightly print this way and they're gonna look stupid. And if they're for functional parts, they're just not gonna work out very well. So we definitely wanna make sure that we get this square. So grab your square and you're gonna wanna check this. Now, you may not be able to see, but this is not square. It's kind of coming back this way a little bit. And we want to be able to fix that. So, there's probably multiple ways to do this. The way I like to do is I grab paper, or in my case, sticky notes, and I just cut off a little piece. So something like this. Just something like this. It doesn't need to be very wide, but then it's, you know, pretty close to the width of that. So grab this, and then you're gonna wanna loosen up these screws, or these bolts. And you don't need to loosen them up too much, just enough that you're gonna be able to get this piece of paper under there. Now, it was leaning slightly this way, so we're gonna wanna put the paper under this side, and that's gonna help it sit better and be more square. So loosen this up, and then you're just gonna kind of pull this up a little bit, slide this in like so. And then once that's in there, you can tighten these back up. And like I said, get one to where it's starting to get tight, and then do the other one, and back and forth until they're tight. Now I just did one layer of paper. If you're, if it's really not square, then you're gonna want maybe like 2 layers of paper. But let's see how this is. Let's see if that's any better. That's pretty darn good. It's gonna be hard to get it exactly perfect, but you can get it pretty darn close, and that's pretty good right there. And I've only had 2 of the 10 of these Ender 3s actually be square. I've had to do this for all, you know, the other 8 of them that didn't come square. So, I mean, in my case, that's 80% of them didn't come the way that they should. So odds are you're probably gonna have to do this. And you definitely should. It's a little more work, but it's gonna make your prints come out a lot nicer and more functionally sound. Now this one is actually the opposite. Instead of leaning back, it's leaning forward. All right, and it doesn't say this in the instructions, so I'm gonna just tell you guys right here. This cord is for the LCD, this rainbow colored one, and the driver back here on the LCD screen, it doesn't tell you which of these 3 ports it goes in. It's the one closest to the heat bed. So I would come under here, and then you can just go ahead and plug that in right there. All right, so the easiest way to get these on is to loosen up these these bolts here, they have these little nuts that fit into these grooves, and then as you twist them, they twist and lock. But to get them to go in, you have to get them loose first. Not loose enough that they come out, but right there. And then you want to get them lined up like this with the groove. Stick it on, put it all the way down here, and then as you tighten them, they should twist and lock. All right, so this next step, you're gonna put the Z rod in the Z motor and this coupler. And one thing to note is that, let me grab this hex key first. This is the right one, yep. Okay, so when you're doing this, you don't want this rod to go all the way down. You want it to be just slightly pulled up, just like a tiny bit, like a millimeter. And that's gonna let this move more freely. What this coupler does is give it a little bit of flexibility, because these rods aren't perfectly straight most of the time. And so when it spins, if it's not straight, it's gonna kind of wobble, and it can give you bad print results. So when you do this, put it all the way down and then just lift it a tiny, tiny bit and then tighten these up. Okay, and this is, let's see, this is step 4, just for reference. You're gonna grab these screws, it's the M4 18P, and there's 2 of them. And I'll show you why this can be kind of tricky. First of all, it's kind of hard to get the screws in there. It's kind of a tight area to work in. So don't get it all the way tightened, just enough to stay in there. And get this second one on. So what you're going to want to do is kind of get it lined up so it's perpendicular, not perpendicular, so it's parallel with this rod. So you want to just kind of get it right there, and then just kind of hold it with your hand up here while you tighten these. And just tighten one, decently tight. Make sure this stays lined up. All right, that's looking pretty good, pretty straight. This is really important to getting good print quality. Otherwise, it's gonna wobble and give you weird lines on your prints. Okay, that's good. That was one of the more tricky parts to do, so. All right, so you line that up, and the tricky part is getting these screws in here. So if you flip this around, I found that it's easy to kind of flip it like that. And then, I mean, if you have some pliers, like some needle nose pliers, that's gonna be helpful in getting these in. But if you have smaller fingers, it's not too bad. So you're just gonna put them in there like that. And I just like to put them both in there first. And then you grab your hex key, and there's some holes on the top here that you go down through. Once you have one in, it makes the whole process a lot easier. And as always, get one snug against there and then do the other one. Don't tighten one up all the way. Okay, and one thing you're gonna want to watch out for is make sure that this bar, so See how right now there's a little bit more of a gap on this side? It's not parallel with the bar. So make sure it's nice and parallel. Okay, and again, you're gonna want to make sure that this line on this piece is parallel to this bar. And what you're gonna wanna do is put this end facing towards the back of the printer. So if you're looking at the front of the printer, holding it like this, and you just wanna get the belt over it first, just onto this little pulley, and you may have to loosen these up like so. See, now it's snapped on there. And now what I like to do is I get this biggest hex key and I like to wedge it in between the aluminum extrusion and this pulley bolt. But you're gonna wanna get these tight first, actually. Not like really tight, just enough that it is secured on there, but loose enough that it can still slide like that. So now you're gonna wanna, I just put this in here and then I just pull it a little bit and it gets this belt nice and tight, and it's a really simple way to get this tight, because really you shouldn't have to, you should really only have to tighten these maybe once, again, in a couple months after you have the printer. They should stay tight after 1 or 2 tightenings. So just get it nice and tight. You don't want to like yank on it, but give it some good tension. When you feel this, you kind of want it to just, you know, be nice and tight, but not just overly tight, because that can pull on this stepper motor and can damage it over time. So just give it some nice tension. You want these 2 screws not to be too tight, and it does say that in the instructions, but sometimes they'll come a little bit too tight. All right, now you're going to want to hook everything up, like the cables and everything. So we're going to start with this Z-axis. Now, as you're plugging these in, sometimes it's kind of helpful to move some of them like under other ones. So I would say you want this one pretty much above as much as you can. So like with this one, I would just pull it under these. And then this plugs in right to the back here. And there you have labels on them. So this is Z. And if there's more than one, like 4Z, this one's like 4 pins. This other one was 3 pins, I believe. And so you can't really mess it up. They can't really go in the wrong one, so. We already hooked up the LCD under here. And then back here, I already hooked it up, but this is for the power supply. You just hook this on. And with older models, they had a problem with this. You guys may have seen other videos on YouTube for this, but this connector was a cheap, bad connector, and it would get really hot and could sometimes start to melt because they weren't soldered correctly and they were getting too hot. These ones are good. If it has these little like gray kind of like handles on them, then it's a good one. Creality has since fixed that, so that's good. All right, so I forgot to tell you guys this before leveling the bed, but I'm gonna put this part before leveling the bed so that you guys don't level the bed before you do this, because you'll have to re-level it. And so basically what you want to do is make sure that this X Z-axis bar is basically level. And so how you can do that is take this, it's the second largest wrench, hex key. And what you're gonna do is just put it right here, and then on the back of the printer, you can twist this Z-axis motor just to bring it up or down. So you're gonna bring it down just until it touches the end of this hex key. And then what you're gonna do is come over to the other side and check that it is level with the other side. And this is a little low. I can't really fit it in there without jamming it in. And so how you can fix that is take this wrench, the larger end, and you can just loosen up these nuts right here, this nut right here, and it's going to allow you to kind of move this up or down a little bit, just kind of lift it up a little bit. And then I kind of just like to push it up and then retighten it. Sometimes that will help. And then to check, you're going to want to come back to this other end and bring the bar down to the hex key. That's good. So that's just barely touching that, so that's level right there. And then you're going to want to make sure this is tight. And then you can keep rechecking. And this is something you can do every so often. And the reason you're going to want to do this is because if this is slanted one way or the other, your prints are going to print kind of diagonal almost. I had one printer that was really off, and I didn't adjust it, and I was having prints that were supposed to be square, but they really looked like a different shape. And so it's really important that you do this to make sure your prints look really good, and if they're functional parts, you want them to be functional. All right, so I have this all ready to turn on. It's all plugged in, so let's go ahead and turn it on for the first time. All right, looks like we're good. It's booting up nice. All right, so now we're gonna work on leveling the bed. And earlier I had mentioned these springs. Now I'm gonna be doing a best Ender 3 upgrades video in the future. So I'm not gonna talk too much about these, but I think they're one of the best and cheapest upgrades you can get. And I honestly suggest just getting them when you buy a printer. When you buy your printer, just get some of these and just put them on during installation, because it's just gonna save you lots of time. What these do essentially is they're just much stronger than the springs that come with the printer. And so they're gonna make it so you have to level your bed much less often, because after you do a couple prints with these springs that come with the printer, they usually will come loose and you have to re-level your bed every so often, and that's kind of a pain. So if you get these, it's gonna make it so you don't have to level your bed quite as often, and that's really awesome. So I'm gonna show you guys how to put these on here. So let's bring this up a little bit. All right. So first thing we're gonna do is take this whole bed off. Take this off. Oh, and one thing you're gonna wanna do too, which I forgot to mention, is check the tightness of this bed as well as this hot end. So you just wanna make sure it's nice and tight on these aluminum extrusions. So with the bed, you're just gonna kinda, and these are both really good. They're both nice and tight. If they weren't tight, what you're gonna do is take this wrench. So the bigger end of this wrench fits right on here, and you can just tighten that and then check it. You can loosen it, check it if it needs to be loosened. But you just want it nice and tight, make sure it runs nice and smooth on here. And the same goes for the bed. Now with the bed, there is 2 of these nuts, and they're on the side of the bed that the LCD is on. But you'll do that the same way. So to take these off, you're going to turn them clockwise. All right, once you have those off, you're just going to take these screws out. And the bed just kind of lifts off here. Now, this one, yeah, the spring came out. So you can take these, you can use them for a different project if you want, or you can just throw them in the garbage. They're not that great of springs. Yep, so take all those out. And then what you're going to want to do is put these new springs in. And I would do this one with this strain relief on it first because it's the most difficult. So how I like to do it is I just start to put this screw in here and then put it through the spring and then through the hole on this strain relief and then through the hole on the bed. So it goes in between the bed and this gantry right here. Okay, so I'd get that one on first and then put this on. And to get them on, you're going to go counterclockwise. And don't get it tight yet, just kind of snug it up to that. Okay. And then you're just going to want to start tightening those up a little bit. Let's turn the heat up. When you level the bed, you're going to want the bed to what you're going to be printing with, basically. So if you're going to be printing PLA at probably 60 Celsius, you're going to want the bed at 60 Celsius when you're leveling. It's going to make it a little bit more accurate. So to do that, you're going to go to Control, Temperature, and then click on Nozzle, Bed. And you're going to go to 60. All right, now let's start leveling the bed. And the best way to do this is to get a piece of paper, and sometimes like thicker paper is good. So honestly, this Creality after sales service card works pretty well. So you can go ahead and grab that. If you have like a business card, that also works really well. And once everything's heated up, you can start leveling. And I want to make it super clear for any beginners that are watching this. When you're leveling the bed, you're not actually leveling it like with a level. You're actually doing something called tramming it. And what that means is you want the bed to be the same distance from the nozzle on basically any point on the bed. So you want it to be level basically with this and with the nozzle. So when you bring it down here, you want it to be just as far away from the nozzle right here as it is over here, and over here, and everywhere on here. And that's super important to know because sometimes beginners think that it actually means making sure the bed is level to like the table or the ground, and that's not the case here. So let's home this again. And disable the steppers as soon as that's done. Okay, and then what we're gonna do is just move this. We're gonna have to get this down a little further. You're gonna get your piece of paper. You're gonna bring it to one corner and you're gonna see if it can fit under there. It's still too tight because you can't fit it under. You need to fit it between the nozzle and the bed surface. And you're gonna want it decently tight on this. I mean, enough that you can still move it, but pretty tight. And you're gonna go clockwise to get it closer to the bed, to make it tighter against this, counterclockwise to loosen it. just for reference. Now that's still too tight, so you want to bring this down. Now you're just going to check this. All right, now you're going to want to check the middle to see how good that is, and that's pretty good. Not bad. And that's quite a process, so that's why I mentioned these springs, because you're going to have to do this a lot less often, which is super nice. Okay, so that was the initial process of leveling. And so the next thing we need to do is load the filament into the printer. And you're gonna do that by going to Control, Temperature, Nozzle, and we're gonna go all the way up to 205 Celsius. Typically for PLA, any good temperatures go from like 190 to 225 roughly. And now what you're gonna do is grab your filament. Right here I have just a little bit left of Overture PLA. It's really good. I've really liked it. You can get it on Amazon or their website. So you're gonna put it up on your spool holder and you're gonna grab the end here. You're gonna pinch this lever and that loosens up the tension. And you're gonna put it through this hole and get it and push it nice until you feel the end, and then you're going to want to keep pushing a little bit, and it's going to push a little bit out of your nozzle. All right. And now we're going to start a live level. You need to load whatever G code you want. In this case, our live level G code onto your SD card. Then you're going to put it in here. Then on the LCD screen, you're going to go to Print from TFT. And then you're going to go to your G code and click on that. And then you're going to wait for it to heat up. So once this starts, what we're going to do is just kind of watch how the plastic is laying down on this surface. And then depending on how it looks, we're going to be adjusting the bed again. So what we're looking for is just the right amount of squish. And I'll show you what that is as we go. All right, I brought the camera down for you guys so we can see exactly what it's looking like. It's really important that you guys can see about how much it's squished onto the bed. So this is actually laying down pretty good. What I kind of like to do is take my fingernail, see if I can scratch it off, and see that wasn't connected very well. You want it to be stuck on there pretty good, but not too squished. As you can see on another attempt, I was a little too close to the bed, and that's what'll happen. And unfortunately with this surface, it's actually pretty hard to get off. So you want to make sure your bed is not too close when you start this. This is looking pretty good. We could maybe go a little closer. Let's try and rip that off. Yeah, see, it came off a little too easy. Let's see. That's looking pretty good as well. Still coming off, so let's tighten that up a little bit too. Now, part of it being too close right here is most of the time these Creality beds, like the aluminum bed, is actually warped. Unfortunately, that's the case with most, and so you are going to get inconsistencies, and you just do all you can do. In my upgrade video, I'll be talking about better bed surfaces that are better for that. But okay, so that's looking pretty good, and it looks like it started on the second line. And so once it gets over here, what we'll want to see is when the two lines are squished together, we want there to be not a gap, but also not so close together that they're starting to lift up. So if you can see right there, let me get this to focus, maybe. Yeah, see how there's that little gap in between those two? You'll bring that just a little closer. Let's see. Now, same with that. So let's go a little closer. And you just basically keep doing this until you get what you want. All right, so in hopes to more effectively convey what I think about the Ender 3, I'm going to be breaking up my review into 6 different categories. The first category I'm going to talk about is assembly. The second category I'm going to be doing is out-of-the-box print quality, so without any upgrades or any modifications, how well it prints after you assemble it. And the third category I'm going to be going over is reliability. The fourth category I'm going to go over is overall value, and within that category I'm actually going to break it into 2 sections. The first one being the build volume to price ratio. So basically how much square centimeters or millimeters you're getting per dollar. And then the second one in that category I'm going to be going over is extra features. Sometimes printers will have like a filament runout sensor or just different add-ons like that. Sometimes maybe a nice build platform. The fifth category I'm going to be talking about is upgradability and community. So basically what I'm going to be talking about is how easy it is to upgrade the printer, what kind of guides there are available. And then for community, I'm going to be talking about Facebook groups, online forums. The sixth thing I'm going to be talking about is out-of-the-box safety. So assembly on the Ender 3 is really easy, as you guys could see. There are a few parts you need to put together, but I think it's only a 9-step process. And so it's super easy. Most of the really detailed and hard to do things are done. And most printers are like this now, but in the past, a lot of printers used to come in kits where you had all of the individual components that you had to put together, and that was kind of a process. I mean, it could take a couple weeks if you could only work on it for a couple hours a day. So it was a process. So this is super convenient. Creality has done a really good job with that. And also the instruction booklet is pretty good. It's pretty clear and concise. And so I'm going to give this printer a 9. The reason I'm not giving it a 10 is because I would consider a 10 to be a printer that comes fully assembled, ready to go out of the box. All right, out of the box print quality. Let's take a look at the Benchy that we printed yesterday and take a closer look and see what it looks like. Overall, this Benchy came out really great. As you can see, there's like a little bit of stringing. You can see that right in there. And then up here, there's a little bit of string as well, but that is mostly to do with slicer settings. That came out pretty good. I did this really fast. I had the slicer set to 120 millimeters per second, but I don't think the firmware on the Ender 3 will actually let you go that fast. So it was probably more like 80 millimeters per second, which is still really fast. So there is a little bit of banding, but that's not to do with the printer. That's just how fast I had it going. There's a little bit of issues with bridging right in here in these archways, and then right up here, and that has to do with the part cooling fan on the Ender 3. It's really not a great system that they have set up. It does do okay, but when it comes to bridging, you'll get some of that. It looks really good up on the top and the inside though. And then I did this in white so you guys could see all of the striations and layer lines. And as you can see, let me get this to focus. You can kind of see these. And that's pretty hard to get rid of completely. I did have my extrusion multiplier too high. I haven't calibrated it for this filament. And then that also has to do with not being able to read the wording on the bottom here. So this is supposed to say CT3D.XYZ, but that's just because I had it a little too close to the bed maybe, and then also my extrusion multiplier on the first layer was set too high. And then it's also supposed to say hashtag 3D Benchy on the back here, but obviously it doesn't. But that's also to do with the extrusion multiplier being too high, and that could also have an effect on these lines on the side, but this is actually pretty good. The circle came out really nice up here. The surface quality on the top is also not great, and that's just because of my extrusion multiplier as well. But overall, this Benchy came out really good. Honestly, I would give the Ender 3 a 9 out of 10 as far as print quality right out of the box goes. All right, so how reliable is the Ender 3? After having 10 of them, I have a pretty good idea of what will eventually break and what has been really good. So first I want to talk about some of the parts that have given me trouble. And the first one I want to talk about is the extruder. So on 2 of the 10 Ender 3s that I've gotten, I've had an issue where a part on this plastic extruder breaks, and there is quite a bit of tension on these, and so that's what causes it. But it can be a huge pain because you'll just be getting under extrusion and your extruder will be clicking, but you can't really see where it's broken. And so it can be a huge pain to figure out, and it takes lots of troubleshooting. So that's a pretty big issue. They really should make these out of metal when they send them to you. All right, and the second part I'm gonna talk about is the hot end. So basically the problem with the hot end and the way it's designed is that this Bowden tube goes all the way down the heatsink to the end of the nozzle. And as your 3D printer moves back and forth and back and forth, this Bowden tube is going to get pulled, and over time it's going to get pulled slightly out of this pneumatic fitting, and that is going to cause a gap between the end of your PTFE tube and the nozzle. And when you're printing, that's bad because the molten filament will start to pool up in that gap, and it will cause serious problems with under extrusion and clogging. And depending on how often you're using your printer, it may not be that big of an issue for you. If you're only printing every couple weeks, you may not have to worry about it for months. It may not be an issue. In my case, I run my printers 24/7, and so I was having this issue with each printer about every 2 weeks. So basically I was fixing a printer every other day, and that can be extremely tedious. Basically what you have to do is take this all apart and clean it out while it's hot. It can be kind of a big issue, and it's either that or just replace the hot end, but that can get expensive if you have a lot of them. And this is the hot end design that Creality has used since their CR10, and it's basically on all of their printers. I think they have a couple of new printers that are coming out that don't quite use this design, but most of them do. And there is fixes for this, and one of them is by a guy named Luke, and he actually has his files on Thingiverse. Basically what it is you print out a little part that is going to fit. So you'll actually take this pneumatic fitting out, and then you'll cut a certain amount of PTFE tube, and then you put the 3D printed part, and then you screw this on top. And basically what that does is it doesn't allow a gap to happen down in here where the filament is hot. There can still be a gap up here, but it doesn't really matter up here because the filament isn't molten in this state. Now the fix does work, but it still is technically a fix. Some things I've not had any problems with is the stepper motors. I haven't had a single power supply on an Ender 3 give out. Another thing I've never had to replace are belts. So based on that, I'm gonna give the Ender 3 a 7 out of 10 for reliability. And that is just due to the extruder and the hot end. Those are both really important parts, and they're really essential to getting good print quality. Now we're going to talk about overall value, and we're going to start with the build volume to price ratio. So the Ender 3 has 220 by 220 by 250 millimeter build volume. Multiply all of those and you're gonna get 12,100. The average price is like about $200 US. So if you divide 12,100 by $200, you get 60.5 centimeters cubed. So that's actually a super great build volume to price ratio. Probably one of the best on the market besides maybe like a CR10. So I'm gonna give that a score of 5 out of 5. All right, so for extra features, the Ender 3 technically has power loss recovery. And basically what that is if you lose power to your printer, when the power comes back on, your printer is gonna heat back up and start printing again where it left off. But from my experience and from basically anything else I've seen on the internet, it's not a great experience using that feature. And the reason for this is because, so say you're printing this benchy and your nozzle as soon as the power goes out, your nozzle stops right here. It just is sitting there, and there's still, your hot end is still hot, and so it's gonna let hot plastic ooze out until it cools off. And so usually you're gonna get a nice little blob of melted plastic on your part, and then when it starts printing again, that plastic that is now on your print as a blob isn't in the extruder, and so you're going to get a little bit of under extrusion, and depending on how big your part is, it could be a whole layer. But that's just my opinion. I mean, it can work for people, and some people do find it useful. For me, I don't really care because I haven't really even found a need for it. I hardly ever lose power. If you're in an area where you do lose power frequently, I could see it being something that you may use, but in my opinion, it's not that big of a deal. Now let's talk about upgradability and the community surrounding the Ender 3. Upgradability is great. There's tons of guides and videos on YouTube on different upgrades you can do with your Ender 3. There's lots of files on Thingiverse that you can print yourself. And as far as community goes, I think it's one of the best communities for a 3D printer. There's tons of Facebook groups and online forums, and also just tons of YouTube videos about the Ender 3. And as a new user of the Ender 3, you can go and join those Facebook groups, and there's always tons of people willing to help you if you have issues. And I think that's super important for 3D printing because it's not perfect, and if you're just getting into it, it can be really hard. So the Ender 3 is going to get a 10 out of 10 for this section. Out of the box safety, how safe is the Ender 3 when you first get it out and assemble it? Fortunately, in June of 2020, Ender 3s are coming shipped with something called thermal runaway protection enabled. Basically, thermal runaway protection is just a safety measure that's going to keep your 3D printer from starting on fire. So how your hot end works is there's a heater cartridge and a thermistor. Your heater cartridge heats everything up, and that's what helps melt the plastic. And what your thermistor does is it tells your printer whether it needs to heat up or cool off. If for some reason your thermistor came detached from your hot end and was just out in the open air, what's going to happen is it's going to read a temperature that's close to air temperature, and so it's going to tell your 3D printer that it needs to keep heating up the heater cartridge. Technically, it will just keep heating up and can start on fire. And obviously, no one wants that. All right, so now I'm going to demonstrate for you guys how you can check whether thermal runaway protection is enabled on your printer. Because honestly, whether the manufacturer says that it's enabled or not, you should always check it because it's super, super important. You don't want it to start on fire. You should check it and make sure that it's enabled. To check whether thermal runaway protection is enabled, what we're gonna do is we're gonna open up this control box here. So you can do that by taking, it's like the second smallest hex key, and there's 2 screws in the front right here. You just take those off. And then there's one in the back here, and you're gonna need to move the bed to get to it. Make sure you move it nice and slow. If you move it too fast, it can make the stepper motor send voltage to the electronics, and that's not good. So make sure you move it nice and slow and steady. You get this back screw out. And then you just take this off, and there's gonna be a fan that's connected. So if you just switch it over like that, it's a good way to set it. And now what we're gonna do is get in here and take off one of the heater cartridge's wires, and that's gonna show us whether thermal runaway protection is enabled or not. So you're gonna wanna bring your hot end up to temperature. So go to control, temperature, nozzle, and you're gonna wanna bring it up to 190 or something in that range. And then go back to the main menu. So you're just gonna unscrew this. And if you have needle nose pliers or some tweezers, that's gonna be good. Just make sure that when you're here in the control box, not to touch anything else. So pull this out, make sure it's not touching anything. And as you can see, it's started to cool down, and now we're just gonna wanna wait. In about a minute or so, it should show up with an error. So let's see what happens. well, there you have it. I'm super disappointed in Creality. I've read from multiple sources, including their website, that any of their new printers are being shipped with thermal runaway protection enabled, and obviously that is not the case. I just bought this a few weeks ago, so it should be one of their newest machines, and it did not have it enabled. And because I'm basing my out-of-the-box safety score on whether or not the printer has thermal runaway protection enabled, the Ender 3 is going to get a 0 out of 10 for this category. Alright, so just to recap, for assembly, the Ender 3 got a 9 out of 10. For out-of-the-box print quality, also a 9 out of 10. For reliability, it got a 7 out of 10. And for overall value, it got a 7 out of 10. Because the Ender 3 is extremely upgradable and has an amazing community behind it, we gave it a 10 out of 10 for that category. And for out-of-the-box safety, the Ender 3 got a 0 out of 10 because it did not have thermal runaway protection enabled. So the overall score for the Ender 3, according to my review, is a 42 out of 60. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love this printer, and I know that many other people do. It's great for print farm, for people that love to tinker. It's just a great overall budget 3D printer. I'm really hoping that the way I set up this review is going to be helpful for you guys in evaluating printers. And remember, if you guys like the video, please like the video. If you want to see more videos like this, go ahead and subscribe. Alright you guys, if you made it to the end of the video, I want to give you a huge thank you. I really appreciate you guys. And to show you guys how much I appreciate you, I'm going to be doing a little mini secret giveaway thing. And you're only going to know about it if you stay till the end of the video. So basically what I'm going to be giving away is a little goodie bag filled with things like nozzles, Bowden tubes, pneumatic fittings, things that I go through on a daily basis and I think that you guys will like as well. So what you need to do to enter the giveaway is to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and then you just need to take a screenshot of it and send it to my email that is in the description. If you guys like these little secret giveaway type things, make sure you keep watching my videos. I'm going to be trying to do them fairly often. I'm also going to be doing bigger things like extruders and hot ends. Again, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you supporting my channel. I really enjoyed making these videos for you guys. So until next time.